Hey guys, May 29th, 1925. A British explorer sends one final message from the Amazon jungle. You need have no fear of any failure. Then he vanishes. Forever. His son with him, his friend too. Hundreds will die searching for them. Over the next 8 decades, the jungle will keep their secrets. But here's what makes this story absolutely wild. This wasn't some reckless amateur. This was Percy Fawcett, the most successful jungle explorer alive, the man who inspired Indiana Jones, and he walked into that green hell, chasing a lost city that might, just might, have been real. Alright, time to get comfortable. Turn off the lights. Get under those covers. We're going deep tonight into one of history's greatest mysteries. If you're enjoying these stories, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us keep making these episodes. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how this story connects people across time zones. Are you in London at midnight, Sydney at dawn, New York wrapping up the day? Wherever you are, welcome to Percy Fawcett's world. Chapter 1. Born into Falling Fortunes. August 18th, 1867. Devon, England. Percy Harrison Fawcett enters the world just as his family's world starts crumbling. Picture this. Generations of Fawcetts living as country gentlemen. Proper estate, good name, solid reputation. But Percy's father, Edward, he's got problems, the kind that destroy families. And young Percy? He's about to grow up watching everything his ancestors built just slip away, one bad decision at a time. This is where obsession begins, not in the Amazon, right here in a crumbling English manor. Edward Fawcett had 2 addictions that would shape his son's entire life: whiskey and cards. Mostly whiskey. The man could put away bottles like other people drink water. And when he was drunk, that's when the gambling got really stupid. Family silver disappearing piece by piece. Land sold off bit by bit. Servants let go. The library, gorgeous old books that had been in the family for generations, gone to pay gambling debts. Little Percy watching it all, learning early that comfort can vanish overnight. That respectability is fragile. That men can destroy everything they touch. By the time Percy turned 10, the Fawcett name meant something different in Devon. Not landed gentry anymore, more like those people who used to have money. Neighbours whispering, shopkeepers refusing credit, Percy walking to school past the family estate that wasn't theirs anymore. The new owners had money, real money, not the fake kind that depends on your father staying sober. And Percy? He's developing that particular kind of pride that comes from having something to prove, that hunger that would eventually drive him into the Amazon and never bring him back. School was rough for Percy. Not the academics. He was sharp. Really sharp. But the social stuff. When your father's the town drunk and your family's lost everything, kids notice. They talk. And Percy learned something important during those years. He learned to be alone, comfortable with just himself and his thoughts, comfortable with maps and books instead of parties. He'd spend hours reading about explorers, Marco Polo, Captain Cook, Burton and Speke, searching for the source of the Nile. These men who'd made something of themselves through pure will, who'd carved their names into history with nothing but determination. At 18, Percy made the decision that would change everything. The Royal Artillery. Now this wasn't some romantic notion about military glory. This was practical. The army meant steady pay. It meant respect. It meant learning skills his drunken father never could teach him. And Percy had spotted something in the artillery. They needed men who could survey, who could map terrain, who could figure out exactly where they were and where they needed to go. For a kid who'd grown up studying atlases like other boys studied cricket scores. Perfect. This was his ticket to somewhere else. Military training was brutal, but Percy thrived on it. The discipline, the structure, After growing up in chaos, this was heaven. He excelled at mathematics, geometry, navigation, all the technical skills that separated good officers from dead ones. His instructors noticed this young man had something special, not just intelligence, but focus, the kind of single-minded determination that comes from watching your family fall apart and deciding you'll never let that happen to you. Percy wasn't just learning to be a soldier, he was learning to be the kind of man his father never was. 1886. Percy gets his assignment. Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, now Ceylon in 1886. This wasn't a vacation posting. This was the edge of the empire. Jungle, disease, rebellions. Most officers saw it as punishment duty. Percy saw it differently. He saw it as opportunity. Because Ceylon needed mapping. The British were trying to build roads, railways, telegraph lines through territory they didn't really understand. And they needed surveyors. Young officers with steady hands and sharp minds who could walk into unknown country and come back with accurate maps. Percy had found his calling. He just didn't know it yet. The Ceylon years transformed Percy from a boy running from his father's failures into a man who could handle anything. Jungle surveying isn't classroom work. It's weeks in green hell with local guides who may or may not know where they're going. It's measuring distances while leeches drain your blood and diseases you can't pronounce try to kill you. It's navigating by the stars when clouds block your view for days. And Percy, he loved every minute of it. Finally, he'd found something he was genuinely gifted at. Something that mattered. Something that was his alone. Ceylon taught Percy skills. Textbooks couldn't. How to read terrain like a book. How to navigate by instinct when instruments failed. How to work with local guides and actually listen to what they knew. How to survive on almost nothing for weeks at a time. Most importantly, it taught him that he could trust himself in situations where most men would panic. When you're alone in the jungle with a broken compass and food for 3 days, you learn what you're really made of. And Percy discovered he was made of something pretty tough. Something that wouldn't break under pressure. By 1890, Percy had earned a reputation. The surveyor who always came back. The officer who could map territory other men couldn't even find. He'd turned his father's failures into his own strength. Edward's weakness for drink and gambling? Percy developed discipline that bordered on obsession. Edward's inability to finish anything? Percy became the man who never quit, no matter what. The skills were building, the confidence growing, the stage being set for something much bigger. Because the British Empire had noticed Lieutenant Fawcett, and they had plans for him. Big plans. As the 1890s rolled on, Percy's reputation grew. The Royal Geographical Society was starting to take notice. Here was a young officer who could survey impossible terrain and bring back accurate maps, who could work with indigenous peoples without starting wars, who seemed immune to the diseases and dangers that killed other explorers. They had their eye on South America, specifically on the vast unmapped regions where Bolivia met Brazil, territory that existed on maps as blank spaces marked unexplored. They needed someone special for that job, someone who wouldn't crack under pressure, someone like Percy Fawcett. But before South America, Percy needed to do something his father never could. Build a stable life, create something lasting, and in 1901 he did. He married Nina Agnes Patterson, a woman as adventurous as he was ambitious, a woman who believed in his dreams and would support them even when those dreams led to obsession, even when they led to a jungle that swallows men whole, even when they led to a final expedition that would take her husband and her eldest son and leave her waiting for news that would never come. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's still 24 years away. Chapter 2. A love emerges. A destiny forms. Picture this. Percy Fawcett, 24 years old, stationed in Ceylon with the Royal Artillery. Hot, humid, endless days of surveying jungle terrain. Then he meets her, Nina Agnes Patterson. She's not your typical Victorian lady. While other women are fainting over beetles, Nina's planning her next adventure. She rides horses like she was born in the saddle, climbs mountains for fun, and when she looks at Percy, she sees someone who gets it, someone who craves the unknown as much as she does. Their courtship isn't flowers and poetry, it's maps spread across tea tables. Stories of uncharted territories, Nina hanging on every word as Percy describes the mathematical precision of surveying. The thrill of being first to map unknown land. She doesn't just tolerate his obsession with exploration, she feeds it, encourages it. Most women of 1901 would demand their husband stay home, build a proper career. Not Nina. She's already dreaming of the places they'll go together, the mysteries they'll uncover, the adventures waiting beyond the horizon. January 1901. Their wedding day. Westminster. Nina in white silk, Percy in his dress uniform. But if you could see their eyes, they're not just promising to love and cherish, they're promising to chase the impossible together. The honeymoon, not Paris or Rome. They go trekking through Scottish highlands, camping under stars, Nina proving she can keep pace with any explorer. Percy realizing he's found more than a wife. He's found his perfect partner in adventure, someone who'll never ask him to choose between her and the unknown. Back in London, their little flat becomes expedition headquarters. Maps covering every wall, Nina learning to read topographical surveys, understanding elevation markers and river systems. Percy teaching her the art of navigation by stars. She's not just supporting his dreams, she's studying them, learning them, making them her dreams too. When Percy comes home frustrated by another day of routine military duties, Nina spreads out those maps, points to blank spaces. Look, she whispers, all that emptiness waiting for us to fill it in. Nina becomes more than a wife. She's Percy's strategist, his sounding board, his anchor. When he's consumed by some geographical puzzle, pacing the room for hours, she's the one who asks the right questions, the ones that unlock his thinking. What if the river bends here instead of there? What if those mountains aren't as high as they look on paper? Percy starts to realize every great explorer needs someone who believes in their vision completely, someone who sees the genius, not the obsession. But London's getting too small. Percy's restless. He's mastered surveying in Ceylon, proven himself capable of precision work in impossible conditions. Now what? Routine garrison duties? Mapping English countryside that's been mapped 100 times before? Nina watches him grow increasingly frustrated. She knows her husband. He needs challenge, mystery, the kind of problem that hasn't been solved yet. Something worthy of the skills he's developed. Something that'll push him to his limits. Something dangerous enough to feel alive. Then the letter arrives. Royal Geographical Society letterhead. Percy's hands shake slightly as he opens it. The RGS has been watching him. His work in Ceylon caught their attention. Word travels fast in mapping circles when someone shows exceptional skill in difficult terrain. They've heard about Lieutenant Fawcett, the young officer who can survey jungle accurately, who doesn't crack under pressure, who brings his teams home alive, the kind of man they need for their most challenging assignments, the impossible ones. The Royal Geographical Society isn't just any organisation. This is the elite club of British exploration, the people who sent Stanley to find Livingstone, who mapped the source of the Nile, who chart the world's blank spaces and claim them for the crown. When they send you a letter, it means they think you're capable of something extraordinary, something that lesser men would attempt and never return from. Percy reads it twice, then hands it to Nina. Her eyes light up. This is it, she breathes. This is your calling. The assignment? South America. Bolivia and Brazil have been arguing over their border for decades. Where exactly does one country end and the other begin? The jungle's so thick, the terrain so brutal, that nobody knows for sure. Rivers change course. Mountains hide behind clouds for months. Indigenous tribes guard territories that don't appear on any map. The RGS needs someone to go in there, establish definitive boundaries, and somehow survive long enough to report back. Previous expeditions? Most never returned. Why Percy? His Ceylon experience proves he can work in tropical conditions. He understands surveying techniques that work in dense vegetation. But more importantly, he's got something most explorers lack: patience, precision, the ability to double-check his calculations before stakes lives on them. The RGS has seen too many adventurers rush into the unknown and get swallowed by it. They need someone methodical, someone who treats exploration like surgery, not like sport, someone who respects the jungle enough to prepare properly for it. That night, Percy and Nina spread maps across their dining table. South America. The Amazon basin stretching like a green ocean across the continent. Rivers drawn in uncertain dotted lines. Vast areas marked simply unexplored. Nina traces the Rio Verde with her finger. Imagine, she whispers, being the first civilized people to see what's out there. Percy nods, but he's already seeing beyond the mapping assignment. Those blank spaces, they're calling to something deeper in him, something that craves not just exploration, but discovery. Nina sees the shift in her husband's eyes. This isn't just about surveying borders anymore. The Amazon is awakening something primal in Percy, a hunger for mystery that goes beyond duty. She could discourage him, point out the dangers, the death rates of previous expeditions, the diseases, the hostile tribes, the 1,000 ways the jungle kills unwary travellers. Instead, she takes his hand. When do we leave? Not when do you leave, we. Because Nina Fawcett doesn't let her husband chase destiny alone. The next months blur together. Preparation becomes obsession. Percy studying Portuguese, learning about tropical diseases, understanding the politics of South American republics. Nina researching supplies, calculating rations, writing letters to contacts who might help. They're not just preparing for a surveying mission anymore, they're preparing for transformation. Because something tells them both. Once Percy enters that jungle, he'll never be quite the same man who left London. The Amazon changes people, calls to them, claims them. December 1906, Portsmouth docks. Percy boarding the ship that'll take him to Bolivia. Nina watching from the pier, tears in her eyes but excitement too. This is what they've dreamed about, what they've planned for. As the ship pulls away, Percy waves until she disappears. He doesn't know it yet, but he's sailing toward his destiny. The Amazon is waiting, and in those green depths, something will call to him, something ancient, something that'll eventually consume everything he holds dear. Chapter 3. A Virgin Land Beckons. 1906. Percy's sitting in his London office when the telegram arrives. Royal Geographical Society. Bolivia-Brazil border survey needed. Dangerous territory, unmapped rivers, hostile tribes. Most explorers who go in don't come back out. Percy's 40 years old, comfortable life, good marriage, steady income, everything a rational man would want to keep. But there's something about that telegram, something about those blank spaces on the map. Those words, unmapped territory, he can't stop thinking about them. Nina finds him staring at maps that night. South America spread across their dining table, his finger tracing the Amazon's tributaries. She knows that look. She's married to an explorer, not a clerk. When do you leave, she asks. Not if, when. Because she already knows. Percy looks up. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. To prepare for territory that's killed every expedition before him. 6 weeks to learn jungle survival, Portuguese, Spanish, how to read indigenous signs, how to not die in the most dangerous place on earth. La Paz, Bolivia, October 1906. Percy's first glimpse of what he's gotten himself into. The air's thin, the mountains impossible, and somewhere beyond those peaks, the Amazon basin, 2 million square miles of uncharted green hell. His local guides won't look him in the eye. They know where he's headed. They've heard the stories. Men who walk into that jungle and just disappear. But Percy's different. He thinks he's different. He's got British confidence, military training, scientific method. What could go wrong? First day in the jungle proper. Percy's confidence lasts about 6 hours. His boots are wrong, his clothes are wrong, his compass spins wildly under the canopy. The heat's like nothing he's ever experienced. Wet, suffocating, and the sounds, Christ, the sounds. Things moving that shouldn't move, things watching that shouldn't be watching. His indigenous guides move through this hell like it's their living room. Percy can barely walk 10 yards without getting turned around. He's beginning to understand something important. He knows absolutely nothing. Week 2. Percy's learning fast or dying slow. How to read the jungle's moods. Which plants heal, which ones kill. How to spot quicksand. How to avoid the really dangerous snakes. There are so many snakes. Anacondas thick as telegraph poles. Bushmasters that will kill you in minutes. And the spiders. God, the spiders. Some big as dinner plates. But here's the thing. He's starting to get it. Starting to move like the jungle wants him to move. Like he belongs here. Like this place is teaching him something. First contact with an uncontacted tribe. Percy's terrified. His guides have vanished, just melted into the green like smoke. He's alone. 30 warriors emerge from nowhere. Painted faces, weapons he can't identify. This is how most explorers die. Right here, right now. But Percy does something smart. Something that will save his life more than once. He sits down, shows his empty hands, waits. Hours pass. Then one warrior steps forward, touches Percy's strange white skin, laughs. The ice breaks. They're curious about this pale ghost man. They feed him. Strange fruits, meat he can't identify but doesn't ask about. And they tell him stories. Not in English, obviously, but stories don't need language. They use their hands. Draw in the dirt. Point toward deeper jungle. Toward places that don't exist on any map. Places where other things live. Ancient places. Percy doesn't understand the words, but he understands the tone, the reverence, the fear. There's something out there, something old, something waiting, and for the first time, Percy wants to find it. 3 months in, Percy's not the same man who left London. His skin's bronze, his muscles cored with new strength. He can read weather in the way leaves turn, track animals by scent, sleep in trees like a damn monkey. The jungle's teaching him, reshaping him, and he's loving every brutal second of it. This is what he was meant for. Not drawing room conversations about the weather. Not society dinners with stuffed shirts. This, raw, real, dangerous, alive in ways London never was. Then he finds them. Ancient earthworks, massive geometric patterns carved into hilltops, pottery shards scattered through clearings that shouldn't exist, evidence of something, some civilization that lived here long before Europeans dreamed of America. His guides won't go near these places. They make signs, mutter prayers, but Percy can't stay away. He measures, maps, collects samples. These aren't primitive settlements. These are sophisticated, advanced. The work of a civilization that understood astronomy, architecture, urban planning. Who were these people? Where did they go? Night in the ruins. Percy camps alone. His guides refuse to stay. Something about bad spirits, angry ancestors. But Percy needs time to think, to process what he's found. Under starlight that seems brighter here, closer here, he starts connecting dots. The pottery styles, the astronomical alignments, the scale of these constructions. This wasn't some small tribe. This was a city, maybe cities, a whole civilization lost to history. And if there was one, there might be others, bigger ones, still hidden in all that green darkness. The transformation's complete now. Percy's become something new, something hungry. The old Percy would have been satisfied with successfully mapping the border. Mission accomplished. Time to go home. But this Percy's tasted mystery, real mystery, not the manufactured drama of London society. This is the genuine article. Secrets that matter, truths that could rewrite history. And once you've tasted that, once you know it's out there waiting, how do you go back to surveying property lines? How do you return to safe? 6 months in the Amazon. Percy's supposed to head home now. Report filed, job done. But he keeps finding excuses to stay. One more river to map, one more tribal contact to make, one more ruin to investigate. Nina's letters are getting worried. The Royal Geographical Society is getting impatient. But Percy's found something more important than duty. He's found his calling, his obsession. And obsessions don't follow schedules. They follow their own dark logic. They consume everything in their path. The journey home feels wrong. Every mile away from the Amazon is a mile away from truth. London's grey, cramped, artificial. People worry about things that don't matter, talk about things that bore him senseless. He tries to readjust, tries to be the husband Nina married, the officer his superiors expect. But at night, alone with his maps and notes, he plans his return, because there's something out there, something calling to him across thousands of miles, and he's going to find it. Percy's back in England, but he's not really back. Part of him never left that jungle, never stopped searching. His official reports are dry, professional, but privately he's developing theories, connecting patterns others can't see, ancient civilizations, lost cities, advanced peoples who vanished without explanation. He starts calling it Zed, his lost city, his white whale, and like Ahab before him, Percy Fawcett's about to chase his obsession into legend, into mystery, into the heart of darkness that will consume his life. Chapter 4. Stories of a Hidden City. Picture Percy around a campfire. 1910. Somewhere deep in the Bolivian jungle. The survey work's done for the day. His indigenous guides are sharing stories in hushed voices. And one word keeps coming up. El Dorado. Not the lake, not the man, the city. They're describing something else entirely. Massive stone walls rising from the forest canopy. Ancient roads stretching for miles. A civilization that supposedly vanished centuries ago, leaving only whispers behind. Here's the thing about Percy. He wasn't some wide-eyed treasure hunter. This was a trained surveyor, British military precision. He'd mapped thousands of miles of unmapped territory. But these stories? They got under his skin. Because the tribes telling them weren't just spinning fantasies. They had details, specific routes, descriptions of architecture, and they all pointed to the same general area, somewhere in the Mato Grosso, the place map still marked as blank space. The stories weren't consistent, which somehow made them more believable. One tribe called it the place of shining stones. Another described it as the city where the sun never sets. But the basics were always the same: massive population, advanced engineering, and then nothing. Like an entire civilization just walked away one day. Percy started keeping notes, cross-referencing details, looking for patterns. This wasn't casual curiosity anymore. This was becoming an investigation. 1911, Percy's back in the jungle for another survey expedition. This time he's actively seeking out the oldest storytellers, the shamans, the keepers of tribal memory. And what he's hearing is blowing his mind. These aren't just legends about one city, they're describing an entire network, connected roads, trade routes, a civilization that might have stretched across thousands of square miles, all of it hidden under green canopy that makes aerial observation impossible. Then came the artifacts, a pottery shard here, an unusual tool there. Nothing dramatic, but Percy had studied archaeology. He knew what advanced metalwork looked like, what sophisticated ceramics meant. These weren't made by simple hunter-gatherers. Someone with serious technological knowledge had lived in this jungle, someone who understood engineering and art and urban planning. The question was, where did they go, and what did they leave behind? Nina noticed the change when Percy returned to England in 1912. He'd always been obsessive about his work, but this was different. He was spending hours drawing maps based on tribal descriptions, calculating distances, trying to triangulate the location of something that might not even exist. Their dinner conversations became monologues about pre-Columbian architecture and lost civilizations. Nina was supportive, but she was also starting to worry. Percy's notebooks from this period are fascinating. Page after page of detailed accounts from different tribes, sketch maps, linguistic notes about place names that kept recurring across different languages. He was treating this like a scientific investigation, but there's also something else creeping in. References to Atlantis, connections to ancient Egypt. The rational surveyor was starting to blend with the mystic, and that combination was becoming dangerous. 1913 expedition. Percy's pushing deeper into unmapped territory than any European has gone before, and the stories are getting more specific. An elderly chief draws him a map in the dirt, shows him a river that leads to a plateau, describes stone steps carved into living rock, talks about buildings that reflect sunlight like mirrors. Percy copies everything down, studies the map until he's memorized every detail. This isn't just curiosity anymore, this is obsession taking root. The breakthrough moment happened during his 1914 expedition. Percy was trading for supplies with a Kalapalo chief when the man brought out something extraordinary, a small stone tablet covered in symbols. Not crude scratches, sophisticated writing. The chief claimed it came from the ruins of an ancient city. Percy held that tablet for hours, tracing the symbols with his finger. This was proof, physical evidence that advanced civilization had existed here. Back in London, Percy showed the tablet to experts at the Royal Geographical Society. The response was mixed. Some were intrigued, others skeptical. But Percy didn't need their validation anymore. He had his own evidence, his own sources, and a growing conviction that he was on the verge of the greatest archaeological discovery in history. The lost city was real. He just had to find it, and he was going to call it Zed. Why Zer? Percy never fully explained his choice of letter, but by 1920 that single symbol had become his obsession. He'd mapped potential locations, calculated supply needs, planned routes that could get a small expedition into the heart of the Mato Grosso and back out alive. Zer wasn't just a place anymore, it was Percy's destiny, his chance to prove that the Amazon had hidden secrets that would rewrite history books. The stories kept coming. Every expedition brought new details, new confirmation that something extraordinary was waiting in those unmapped territories. Percy was hearing about gold, yes, but that wasn't what drove him. He was hearing about libraries, about stone calendars, about engineering that rivaled ancient Rome. This wasn't treasure hunting, this was the chance to discover a lost branch of human civilization, and Percy was convinced he was the only one who could find it. By 1924, Percy had made his decision. One more expedition. Not for the Royal Geographical Society, not for scientific glory, for the pure, burning need to know what was really out there. The indigenous stories had given him coordinates. The artifacts had given him proof. His own experience had given him confidence. All he needed was the right team and enough supplies. The city of Zed was waiting, and this time he was going to find it. Nina found him in his study one evening, staring at his collection of maps and artifacts. 20 years of stories, hundreds of conversations with tribal elders, drawers full of pottery shards and mysterious symbols. Percy looked up at her with that familiar gleam in his eyes, the same look he'd had before every expedition. But this time it was different, more intense, more final. "I'm going to find it, Nina," he said quietly. "Whatever it takes." Chapter 5. The Jungle's Trials. Piranhas and Anacondas. By 1910, Percy Fawcett had earned something no other explorer possessed: a reputation for bringing his men back alive. While other expeditions disappeared into green hell, never to return, Percy's teams emerged from months in the Amazon, battered, scarred, half mad from fever, but breathing. This wasn't luck. This was hard-won jungle wisdom, and it came at a price. Every lesson written in blood and terror. The Amazon doesn't kill you quickly. It's patient, methodical. It waits for you to make one mistake, drink from the wrong stream, step on the wrong log, reach for the wrong vine. Percy learned this on his second expedition, when his boot brushed against something in the murky water. The river exploded, dozens of silver bodies thrashing, piranhas. His leather boot saved his foot, barely. The lesson? Never trust calm water. But piranhas were almost predictable compared to what lurked in the deeper waters. Anacondas. 20 feet of pure muscle that could crush a man's ribs like twigs. Percy's first encounter happened during a river crossing. The water was chest deep, moving slow. Then something brushed against his leg. Not a log, not debris, something alive, something massive. He froze, absolutely still. The snake investigated, then moved on. Percy aged 10 years in those 30 seconds. His men weren't always so lucky. On the 1911 expedition, a porter named Santos stepped off the path to relieve himself. The scream brought everyone running. They found him wrapped in coils, thick as a man's waist, consciousness fading fast. Percy didn't hesitate. Machete in hand, he hacked at the snake's head, while his men pulled Santos free. The anaconda released its grip, but Santos never walked quite right again. Broken ribs, compressed spine, jungle mathematics. Word spread through the Royal Geographical Society. Fawcett's expeditions suffered casualties, sure, but they came back. Other teams? Well, there were a lot of memorial plaques being installed in London churches. Percy developed rules. Never travel alone. Never camp near still water. Always carry antivenom, even though it rarely worked. Most importantly, respect the jungle. It wasn't trying to kill you personally, you were just inconsequential. Temporary, the jungle had been here for millions of years. The daily routine was exhausting. Up before dawn, breaking camp while the air was still cool. Machetes cutting through vines thick as cables. Every step earned, every mile paid for in sweat and blood. By noon, the humidity was crushing, like breathing through wet wool. The canopy so thick above that twilight lasted all day, and everywhere the sounds. Howler monkeys, insects the size of small birds, things moving in the undergrowth that you never quite saw. Percy adapted faster than most. He learned to sleep sitting up against trees. Anacondas couldn't get leverage that way. He discovered which plants the indigenous guides used for cuts and infections. Most crucially, he learned to read the water. Fast-moving streams were safer. Still pools were death traps, not just for the piranhas, but for the parasites, the bacteria, the microscopic horrors that could kill you slowly from the inside out. Clean water was survival. Everything else was negotiable. The worst encounter came in 1913. Percy was mapping a tributary when his canoe overturned. The river wasn't deep, but it was teeming with piranhas in a feeding frenzy. Something had died upstream. Percy surfaced to find the water churning silver and red. He had maybe seconds before they noticed him. Using his paddle as a weapon, he fought his way to shore. 30 feet felt like 30 miles. He made it, but his right leg looked like hamburger. His men wanted to turn back, cancel the expedition. Percy refused. Using indigenous remedies, crushed leaves, tree bark, plants he couldn't pronounce, he treated the wounds himself. Infection was the real enemy now. In the jungle's heat and humidity, the smallest cut could become gangrenous in days. Percy's leg swelled to twice its normal size. Fever set in. For a week he drifted in and out of consciousness, while his men debated whether to bury him or carry him. He survived. Against every medical probability, Percy's fever broke. The wounds began healing. His men looked at him differently after that, like he had some kind of supernatural protection. Maybe he did. Or maybe he just understood something about the jungle that others didn't. You couldn't conquer it. You couldn't tame it. But you could negotiate with it, show respect, learn its rules, pay its prices, and sometimes it let you live. Back in London, Percy's reputation grew with each successful return. Other explorers sought his advice. The Royal Geographical Society sent him their most dangerous assignments. He became the go-to man for impossible surveys, the Amazon specialist who could navigate uncharted rivers and return with maps, specimens, and most importantly, living men. But success came with its own burden. Each expedition pushed further into unmapped territory. Each journey raised the stakes higher. Percy began documenting jungle survival techniques, which vines held drinking water, how to build shelters that stayed dry in torrential rains. The signs that warned of jaguar territory, poisonous snakes, quicksand. He filled notebooks with indigenous knowledge, medicinal plants, navigation techniques, warnings passed down through generations. This wasn't just exploration anymore, it was education. Percy was becoming the Amazon's translator, teaching the civilized world how to survive in the green hell. But the jungle was changing him too. Each expedition left marks, scars from anaconda encounters, permanent fever damage, a slight limp from the piranha attack. More than physical changes though. Something in his eyes. His men noticed it. His wife Nina noticed it. When he returned home, Percy was becoming part of the jungle, learning its patience, its ruthlessness, its complete indifference to human ambition. He was evolving into something between explorer and predator. By 1920, Percy Fawcett had survived more Amazon encounters than any living explorer. Piranha attacks, anaconda wrestling matches, disease outbreaks that killed half his team, yet he kept returning. Each expedition deeper, each journey more dangerous, because somewhere in that green maze, he believed, lay the discovery that would justify every scar, every near-death experience, every man he'd lost along the way. The jungle had taught him to survive, but it had also taught him to obsess. Chapter 6: Blurring Reality, Theosophy and Atlantis. Something started shifting in Percy Fawcett around 1910. The man who'd made his reputation on precise surveying and careful observation, he was changing. The Amazon had shown him things that didn't fit into neat Victorian categories. Ancient pottery, massive earthworks, stories from indigenous peoples about cities that shouldn't exist. And Percy, he started looking for explanations that went way beyond conventional archaeology. This is where our rational explorer begins his slide into something much more dangerous. Back in London, there was this movement sweeping through intellectual circles, theosophy, founded by Helena Blavatsky. It promised to unlock ancient wisdom, secret knowledge hidden from ordinary minds, root races, lost continents, advanced civilizations that predated recorded history. To most scientists, this was complete nonsense, but to Percy Fawcett, fresh from the Amazon, with genuine mysteries rattling around his head, it sounded like answers, dangerous answers that would eventually cost him everything. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Here's what happened. Percy starts reading Blavatsky, starts attending theosophical meetings, and suddenly those pottery shards he'd found weren't just evidence of unknown indigenous cultures. They were proof of something much grander, an advanced civilization connected to, wait for it, Atlantis. I know how this sounds, but remember, Percy had genuine archaeological evidence, real pottery, Real earthworks. The tragedy is watching legitimate discoveries get twisted into fantasy. That's the danger of mixing real science with wishful thinking. The Atlantis connection. This is where Percy really went off the rails. According to the theosophical doctrine, Atlantis wasn't just Plato's philosophical allegory, it was real. And when it sank, survivors scattered across the world, establishing advanced colonies, South America being one of them. Percy became convinced that his lost city of Z wasn't just an indigenous settlement, it was an Atlantean outpost, a surviving fragment of the most advanced civilization in human history. His wife Nina watched this transformation with growing alarm. Picture this scene. Percy's home study, 1912. Maps covering every surface, archaeological reports mixed with theosophical texts. And Percy, the Royal Geographical Society, found themselves in an impossible position. On one hand, Percy was their most successful Amazon explorer. His surveys were impeccable. His survival skills. Nina Fawcett watched her husband disappearing into obsession. The man she'd married was methodical, practical, someone who measured twice and cut once. But this new Percy, he'd spend hours in seances, trying to contact ancient Atlantean spirits for guidance about Zed's location. He consulted psychics, read tarot cards. Nina supported his expeditions because she understood exploration. But this mystical turn, it terrified her, because she could see where it was leading, and she knew she couldn't stop him. Here's what makes Percy's story so tragic. He wasn't completely wrong. Those pottery shards were real. The earthworks existed. Modern archaeology has confirmed that the Amazon supported complex civilizations capable of supporting hundreds of thousands of people. Percy was ahead of his time in recognizing indigenous sophistication, but instead of sticking to evidence, he wrapped legitimate discoveries in theosophical fantasy. The truth wasn't exciting enough. He needed Atlantis. He needed cosmic significance, and that need would destroy him. Watch how obsession works. Percy finds a pottery shard, real artifact, genuine evidence of sophisticated culture. But then theosophy whispers, what if this connects to Atlantis? And Percy's trained mind, instead of maintaining scientific skepticism, starts building elaborate theories. One piece of legitimate evidence becomes the foundation for increasingly wild speculation. It's like watching someone solve half of a puzzle correctly, then filling in the missing pieces with pure imagination, and convincing themselves the whole thing is equally valid. The really insidious part. Percy's reputation gave credibility to ideas that should have been dismissed immediately. When some random person claims they've found proof of Atlantis, everyone laughs. When Lieutenant Colonel Percy Fawcett, respected surveyor and successful explorer, suggests the same thing, people listen. His genuine achievements became a platform for promoting increasingly dangerous delusions. And Percy, intoxicated by the attention and convinced of his cosmic mission, pushed deeper into territory where science ends and fantasy begins. By 1920, Percy was becoming isolated from mainstream archaeology. His lectures drew crowds, but not scientific peers. Adventure seekers loved his Atlantis theories. Mystics treated him like a prophet, but serious explorers, they were backing away quietly. Percy didn't care. He'd found his true calling, not mapping rivers or surveying boundaries. Finding Zed, proving that human civilization was older, grander, more mysterious than anyone imagined, even if it meant risking everything, including his son's life. There's a moment when rational inquiry tips into dangerous obsession. For Percy, it probably happened sometime around 1918. That's when Finding Zed stopped being about discovery and became about vindication, proving he wasn't just another Victorian adventurer chasing glory, proving that his theosophical insights were genuine revelations, proving that the Amazon held secrets that would revolutionize human understanding. The tragedy is that Percy's legitimate archaeological instincts got hijacked by his need to be cosmically significant. Here's what Percy couldn't see. His mystical beliefs weren't enhancing his scientific work. They were consuming it. Real evidence got twisted to fit predetermined theories. Practical planning gave way to wishful thinking. Instead of preparing for jungle dangers, he was consulting spirit guides. Instead of learning from indigenous peoples as experts in their own territory, he saw them as degraded remnants of a glorious Atlantean past. The very mindset that should have kept him alive was being systematically destroyed by his need for cosmic significance. By 1924, Percy Fawcett had become two people: the respected explorer whose jungle skills were legendary, and the mystic convinced that finding Z would prove Atlantis existed and human history needed rewriting. These two versions of himself were about to collide catastrophically, because Percy was planning one final expedition, and this time he wasn't just risking his own life, he was taking his 21-year-old son Jack into the Amazon, based on guidance from spirit mediums and theosophical doctrine. What could possibly go wrong? Chapter 7: A Father's Folly, the Final Expedition. By 1925, Percy Fawcett had become something else entirely. Not just an explorer anymore, but a man possessed. 7 expeditions into the Amazon. 7 times he'd come back alive when others died. But this time he wasn't going alone. 21-year-old Jack Fawcett sat across from his father, eyes bright with adventure fever, the same fever that was about to destroy them both. This is the story of how obsession became a family curse. Picture Jack Fawcett in 1924, fresh out of school, tall like his father but soft where Percy was weathered leather. Jack had grown up hearing bedtime stories about jaguars and hostile tribes, about rivers that could swallow men whole. To him, the Amazon wasn't a place that killed, it was where heroes were made. And Percy saw his son's eagerness and thought, perfect. Finally, someone who believes in Zed as much as I do. Someone to carry on the dream when I'm gone. Nina Fawcett watched this plan take shape with growing dread. She knew the jungle better than most wives, knew what it did to men. But Percy, he was already planning their route, sketching supply lists, talking about how Jack's young eyes might spot what his aging ones had missed. He needs to see it for himself, Percy told her. He needs to understand what we're fighting for. Nina bit her tongue. She knew there was no fighting Percy when Zed called. Then there was Raleigh Ramel, Jack's best friend since childhood, 22 years old, eager to prove himself, completely unprepared for what lay ahead. Raleigh had never been further from England than a weekend in Scotland, but Percy needed funding for this expedition, and Raleigh's family had money, so when Raleigh begged to come along, Percy said yes. 2 untested young men, 1 obsessed explorer. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turns out. Percy justified it all beautifully. In letters to the Royal Geographical Society, he painted Jack as a natural explorer. Keen eye for detail, he wrote. Physical stamina of youth. What he didn't mention, Jack had never spent a single night sleeping rough, never gone a day without proper food, never faced anything more dangerous than a bad exam. But Percy convinced himself that bloodline mattered more than experience, that Fawcett courage would see them through. The truth was simpler and darker. Percy was 57 years old. His body was breaking down from decades of jungle disease and hardship. He knew this would be his last shot at finding Zed, and he couldn't bear the thought of dying alone in the jungle, his dreams dying with him. If Jack came along, if Jack saw the city with his own eyes, then someone would believe, someone would remember, even if it killed them both. Percy spent months preparing Jack for what lay ahead, teaching him to read maps, identify edible plants, treat infected wounds. But you can't compress 20 years of survival knowledge into a few afternoon lessons. Jack learned the theory, he memorized the rules. What he couldn't learn was the instinct, that animal awareness that had kept Percy alive when smarter men died. that only comes from years of having the jungle try to kill you. February 1925. The three men stood on the docks in London, about to board the ship that would take them to Brazil. Percy looked confident, almost serene. This was his moment, his vindication. Jack and Raleigh looked like what they were, excited schoolboys about to have the adventure of a lifetime. Photographers captured the moment, the famous explorer and his son setting off to find a lost civilization. Nobody photographed Nina's face as she watched them leave. The journey to Brazil took weeks. Percy used the time to drill Jack and Raleigh on jungle survival, how to spot quicksand, which insects carry disease, how to treat snakebite. But ship lessons are one thing. The real Amazon is something else entirely. No amount of preparation can ready you for the crushing heat, the constant threat, the way the jungle gets inside your head and starts whispering. Percy knew this. He took them anyway. By April, they'd reached Cuiabá, the last outpost of civilization before the Mato Grosso. Percy hired local guides, bought supplies, sent letters home. In excellent health and spirits, he wrote to Nina. But the local Brazilians looked at Jack and Raleigh and shook their heads. They'd seen this before, young Europeans who thought adventure was a game. The jungle didn't play games. The jungle kept score, and it always won. Percy's plan was ambitious, even by his standards. They would head northeast from Cuiabá, deeper into the Mato Grosso than any expedition had gone before. No backup plan, no rescue mission, if they failed to return. Percy had convinced himself that Zed lay in this unmapped wilderness, waiting for someone brave enough to find it, or foolish enough to die trying. At 57, he couldn't tell the difference anymore. May 20th, 1925, their last day in Cuiabá. Percy hired a young Brazilian guide named Luiz. Luiz took one look at Jack and Raleigh and asked for double his usual fee. When Percy asked why, Luiz shrugged. "Because I might not come back," he said. That night Jack wrote in his diary, "Tomorrow we enter the unknown. I've never been more excited in my life." He had no idea he was writing his own eulogy. May 29th, 1925. Their final message to the outside world. Percy wrote to Nina, "You need have no fear of any failure," but his handwriting was shaky. Jack looked thinner than when they'd left England. Raleigh was already showing signs of jungle fever. The Brazilian guide Luiz had turned back 2 days earlier, refusing to go further. Smart man, he knew what Percy wouldn't admit. They were walking into their own graves. And then, silence. 3 men walked into the Mato Grosso and vanished as completely as if they'd never existed. Percy's obsession had finally claimed not just him, but his son and his son's friend. The jungle closed behind them like water, leaving no trace, no trail to follow, no clues to find. Just endless green wilderness, and the growing certainty that the Fawcett expedition was never coming home. The legend of Zed had claimed its final victims. Chapter 8. Into the Abyss, the Last Message. May 29th, 1925. Dead Horse Camp. Somewhere deep in the Mato Grosso. Percy Fawcett wakes before dawn, as he has for 7 expeditions now. But this morning feels different. Final. He's 57 years old. His beard gone white. His body worn down by decades of jungle fever and arrow wounds. Today, he'll send one last message home. Today, he'll disappear forever. Jack stirs in his hammock. 21 years old, trusting his father completely. Raleigh mumbles something about breakfast. None of them know this is goodbye. The morning ritual plays out like hundreds before. Coffee over a small fire, checking supplies. Percy studies his maps one more time, tracing routes with a weathered finger. The lost city of Zed waits somewhere ahead. He can feel it. 20 years of searching, and he's never been this close. Jack watches his father with something between admiration and concern. The old man's obsession has only grown stronger. Raleigh just wants to go home, but neither son nor friend will abandon Percy Fawcett. Not when he's this close to vindication. Percy pulls out paper and pencil. His final dispatch to civilization. To Nina, waiting in England with her maps and worry. He writes with the confidence of a man who survived everything the Amazon could throw at him. Anacondas, hostile tribes, fever that should have killed him 3 times over. He's the one explorer who always comes back. Always. In his mind, this expedition isn't different. It's just longer. The letter takes shape under his steady hand. Reassuring words, confident predictions. One last gift of hope for his wife. The message goes to their Brazilian guides, who'll carry it back to civilization. Percy's handwriting, still steady despite everything. You need have no fear of any failure. That line, that single sentence that will haunt Nina for decades. No fear of failure. From a man walking into unmapped jungle with his son and a friend. From a man who's already pushed deeper than anyone else dared. The guides take the letter, mount their horses, and ride toward Cuiabá. They're the last people to see the 3 Englishmen alive. London. Nina Fawcett sits in her drawing room, surrounded by maps of Brazil. She's traced Percy's route 1,000 times, measuring distances, calculating travel times. The telegram arrives on June 15th, 17 days after Percy wrote it. 17 days of jungle between her husband and hope. She tears it open with shaking hands. His words leap off the page, confident, almost cocky. You need have no fear of any failure. She reads it again, again. Her relief is immediate, overwhelming. Percy sounds like Percy, strong, certain, ready to come home with proof. The full message reveals Percy's mind in those final hours. He's optimistic about their progress. The weather's been good. They have enough supplies. The indigenous people they've encountered seem friendly. Everything points to success. He mentions Jack's enthusiasm, Raleigh's steady support. He talks about the signs they're seeing, ancient pottery shards, unusual earthworks, hints that a great civilization once thrived here. The lost city of Z feels within reach. We are advancing into unknown country, he writes. Unknown. The word will echo in Nina's dreams for 30 years. Nina clutches the telegram like a lifeline. She's been married to an explorer for 22 years. She knows the risks. The malaria, the arrows in the dark. The 1,000 ways the jungle kills unprepared men. But Percy isn't unprepared. He's the one who comes back, always. She pins the message to her study wall, next to maps and photographs from his previous expeditions. No fear of any failure. She wants to believe, needs to believe, but something cold settles in her stomach. A wife's intuition that no amount of confidence can quiet. Back at Dead Horse Camp, Percy folds his compass and checks his rifle one last time. Jack shoulders his pack without complaint. 21 and strong, he's proven himself over months of jungle travel. Raleigh adjusts his camera equipment. He's documenting everything, hoping to bring back proof of their discoveries. The 3 men look like seasoned explorers now, bearded, lean, adapted to jungle life. Percy studies the wall of green ahead. Somewhere in that maze of trees and rivers lies his destiny, the culmination of 20 years searching. They form single file and start walking. The jungle swallows them immediately. One step off the clearing, and they're in another world. Vines thick as ship's rope, trees that block out the sun, the sound of their footsteps muffled by centuries of rotting leaves. Percy leads, cutting through undergrowth with practiced swings of his machete. Jack follows close behind, alert for snakes and spiders. Raleigh brings up the rear, already sweating despite the morning coolness. Within minutes, Dead Horse Camp disappears behind them. The last connection to civilization. Gone. Now there's only green, and silence, and mystery. Hours pass. The jungle grows denser, wilder, more alien with each mile. This isn't the mapped Amazon of riverside settlements and trading posts. This is the heart, the secret centre where men disappear and legends are born. Percy navigates by compass and instinct, following game trails and ancient paths that might be indigenous routes, or might be nothing at all. They cross streams, push through walls of vegetation, climb over fallen giants that died before Columbus sailed. The modern world feels like a dream. There's only green, only heat, only the sound of their breathing. What they left behind tells its own story. The guides found their final camp a few days later. 3 hammocks still strung between trees, cooking pots cleaned and stacked, a small cache of supplies carefully organised. No signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies, no message explaining their plans. It looked like they'd simply continued, walked deeper, walked towards something only Percy could see. The guides gathered what they could carry and rode back to civilization with news that would haunt Nina Fawcett for the rest of her life. The men had vanished. The news reaches London in fragments. First, reports that the expedition is overdue. Then, confirmation that Percy's party missed their scheduled resupply. Finally, the terrible certainty they're lost. Nina refuses to accept it. Percy's survived worse. He'll find a way out. Send word. Come home with stories and proof and vindication. But weeks become months. Months become years. Search parties set out and fail to return. The Brazilian government sends soldiers. Explorer clubs launch expeditions. Everyone looking for the man who found the unmappable. All of them swallowed by the same green darkness. The questions multiply like jungle vines. Did hostile tribes kill them? Did disease or accident claim all 3? Did they find the lost city and choose to stay? Did Percy's obsession finally consume not just himself but his son and friend? The theories grow wilder with each failed search. Some say they're living as kings in an undiscovered civilization. Others whisper about bones found decades later. Maybe Fawcett's, maybe not. The jungle keeps its secrets, holds its dead, offers no answers to the families who wait and wonder and slowly accept the unacceptable truth. May 29th, 1925. The last day anyone saw Percy Fawcett alive. The last words he ever sent to the world. You need have no fear of any failure. Confident to the end. Certain of success even as he walked into oblivion. 3 men, swallowed by green darkness, leaving behind only questions and grief, and the terrible knowledge that some mysteries are meant to stay buried. The Amazon had claimed its greatest challenger, and somewhere in Nina's London drawing room, maps of Brazil gather dust while she waits for news that will never come. Chapter 9. An Enduring Silence. Waiting for Word. London, June 1925. Nina Fawcett sits by her window, watching the postman approach. Same time every morning, same ritual of hope and dread. It's been 3 weeks since Percy's last telegram from Dead Horse Camp. 3 weeks of nothing. She tells herself it's normal. Expeditions go quiet all the time in the jungle. Communication breaks down. Equipment fails. But deep in her chest, something cold and sharp is growing. The silence feels different this time. Heavy. Final. Those first weeks blur together. Nina maintains her routine like armour against panic. Morning tea. Correspondence with the Royal Geographical Society. Afternoon walks through Hyde Park, where she and Percy used to plan his expeditions. She writes letters to contacts in Brazil, asking for news. Any news. The responses trickle back slowly. No one has seen them. No one has heard anything. The jungle has swallowed her husband and son whole. But Nina refuses to believe they're gone. Not yet. The mailbox becomes her shrine. Every morning that walk to the front door. The sound of letters hitting the floor. Her heart hammering as she sorts through bills and social invitations, searching for anything from Brazil, anything with Percy's handwriting, or Jack's. Even a telegram from some Brazilian official would be welcome. Proof that someone, somewhere, knows what happened to them. But day after day, nothing. Just the ordinary mail of an ordinary life that stopped being ordinary the moment they disappeared. Nina creates new rituals around waiting. She keeps Percy's study exactly as he left it. Maps still spread across his desk, weighted down with his brass compass, his journals stacked in careful piles. She waters his plants, tends his collection of Amazonian artifacts, like he might walk through the door any moment and notice if she'd let them gather dust. Friends find her there most evenings, surrounded by the evidence of his obsession, still believing he'll come home. Well-meaning friends try to help. They bring casseroles and sympathy, sitting in Nina's parlour, speaking in hushed voices about acceptance and moving forward. They don't understand. Percy isn't dead. He's just temporarily unreachable. Delayed. The jungle is vast and communications are difficult. He's probably building rafts, or recovering from illness, or negotiating with tribal leaders. He's resourceful. He's survived worse. These people never knew him like she did. They never saw his determination, his almost supernatural ability to survive the impossible. By autumn, the newspapers begin paying attention. First, just small items buried in the back pages. British explorer, overdue in Amazon. But as weeks turn to months, the headlines grow larger, more insistent. The Daily Mail runs a full spread, mystery of missing colonel. Suddenly Nina's private anguish becomes public entertainment. Reporters camp outside her house. They want quotes about her feelings, her hopes, her fears. She stops answering the door. The circus of attention feels like a betrayal of Percy's dignity. The Royal Geographical Society calls emergency meetings. Nina sits in their mahogany-panelled conference room, surrounded by elderly men in tweeds arguing about duty and resources. Some want to organise search expeditions immediately. Others counsel patience, or worse, acceptance. The Amazon is unforgiving, they say. Many explorers have vanished without trace. Nina watches their faces and sees the calculation behind their concern. They're already writing Percy's obituary in their minds. She stands and walks out. International press picks up the story. American newspapers run sensational headlines. Lost city hunter vanishes. French papers speculate about cannibals and ancient curses. The story has everything: mystery, adventure, a famous explorer, his young son, the legendary lost city of Zed. Nina reads these accounts with growing horror. They're turning Percy's disappearance into entertainment. A penny dreadful. His life's work reduced to pulp fiction headlines. But she needs the attention. Public pressure might force action. Letters pour in from around the world, psychics claiming to have visions of Percy's location. Adventurers offering to mount rescue expeditions for the right price. Cranks with theories about everything from alien abduction to time travel. Nina reads them all, desperate enough to consider even the most ridiculous suggestions. Meanwhile, pressure builds on the British government. Questions in Parliament. Demands for official search missions. The Empire doesn't abandon its heroes, but bureaucratic wheels grind slowly, and each day of delay might be another day too late. Nina takes matters into her own hands. She begins organising her own search expedition, reaching out to Percy's contacts, fellow explorers, anyone who might help. She liquidates investments, sells jewellery, anything to raise funds. The irony isn't lost on her. She's planning the same kind of obsessive Amazon expedition that stole her husband and son. But what choice does she have? Sitting in London, accomplishing nothing, feels like abandoning them, like accepting they're dead. False leads arrive regularly, cruel sparks of hope in the darkness. A trader claims he saw 3 white men near the Tapirs River. Indigenous people report strange visitors, asking about ancient cities. Each rumour sends Nina's heart racing. She cables Brazil, demanding investigations, follows every thread, no matter how thin. But each lead dissolves under scrutiny. Mistaken identity, wishful thinking, old stories retold and embellished. The jungle keeps its secrets, and her hopes die 100 small deaths. Seasons change outside Nina's window. Summer heat gives way to autumn fog. Winter frost covers the garden where she once planned Percy's expeditions. Spring arrives without them. A full year passes. Then, too, the sharp edge of panic dulls into chronic ache. Friends stop mentioning them. Newspapers move on to fresher mysteries. But Nina's vigil continues. She ages in dog years, each month without news taking something vital from her, yet she maintains her watch. What else can she do? Nina faces her darkest thoughts alone. Late at night, when the house creaks around her and London sleeps, she allows herself to imagine the worst. Percy and Jack dead in some nameless jungle clearing, bones scattered by animals. No grave, no marker, no way to ever know what happened. The rational part of her mind knows it's probable. The Amazon kills even experienced explorers, but her heart rebels against acceptance. While there's no proof of death, hope survives. Barely, but it survives. The world watches with Nina now. Letters arrive daily from strangers offering support, sharing their own stories of loss and waiting. She's become a symbol of something, loyalty perhaps, or the refusal to surrender hope. Newspapers print updates on her vigil, alongside news of the missing expedition. Mrs. Fawcett maintains hope. She didn't ask for this role, this public widowhood, but if it keeps pressure on authorities to search, she'll bear it, for Percy, for Jack, for the answers she desperately needs. Chapter 10. A Dangerous Obsession. The Fatal Searches. Here's the thing about Percy Fawcett's disappearance. It didn't just claim 3 lives, it became a magnet for disaster, a death trap disguised as adventure. Because once word got out that the great Colonel Fawcett had vanished, every explorer, treasure hunter and glory seeker in the world wanted to be the one to find him, to solve the mystery, to claim the fame. They had no idea they were walking into the same nightmare that had already swallowed their hero whole. The first rescue attempt started almost immediately. Nina Fawcett, still holding on to hope, funded expedition after expedition. She mortgaged everything, sold family heirlooms, begged the Royal Geographical Society for help, and brave men answered her call. They genuinely wanted to help, to bring Percy and the boys home. But the Amazon doesn't care about good intentions. It doesn't care about your noble motives or your rescue mission. It just sees fresh meat walking into its territory, and it was hungry. Between 1925 and 1965, historians estimate over 100 people died trying to find Fawcett. 100. Think about that number for a second. Percy took 2 lives with him into that jungle, but his disappearance killed 50 times that many. It became the deadliest mystery in exploration history, not because of what happened to him, but because of what happened to everyone who went looking for him. The cure became worse than the disease. The rescue became deadlier than the original disaster. In 1928, just 3 years after Fawcett vanished, Commander George Dyett launched the first major search. British Navy man, tough as nails, he brought modern equipment, radios, medical supplies, experienced guides. He was going to do this right. Do it smart. For months he followed Fawcett's trail through the Mato Grosso, found evidence they'd been there, found indigenous tribes who remembered seeing them. He was so close, so damn close to solving it. Then the jungle started picking off his men. Disease hit Dyett's team first. Always does. Malaria, yellow fever, infections from cuts that won't heal in the humid air. Then the accidents. Men falling into rivers, getting lost in the endless green maze, equipment failures in the wet season, and slowly, one by one, Dyett realized he wasn't rescuing anyone. He was creating more victims, more families back home, waiting for news that would never come. He turned back. Smart man, but others weren't so wise. They kept coming, wave after wave of them. The worst part, most of these search parties had no business being in the jungle. Weekend adventurers reading about Fawcett in newspapers. Rich dilettantes wanting excitement. College boys looking for glory. They saw the romance but missed the reality. Fawcett had spent 20 years learning to survive in the Amazon. 20 years of brutal education. These newcomers thought they could waltz in and crack the case in a few months. The jungle taught them otherwise. Usually fatally, usually quickly. In 1932, Stefan Rattin, Swiss trapper and explorer, disappeared while searching for Fawcett. Never seen again. 1934, Albert de Winton, British film actor turned adventurer, gone. 1936, Peter Fleming. Yeah, Ian Fleming's brother. He got out alive, but barely. Lost half his team. 1951, Orlando Villas-Boas found human bones he claimed were Fawcett's. Turned out to be a hoax, but 3 more men died on that expedition anyway. The jungle was playing with them now, enjoying the game. Here's the twisted irony. Every failed search made the mystery more compelling, more tantalizing. If all these experienced explorers couldn't find Fawcett, he must have discovered something incredible, right? Maybe he did find his lost city. Maybe that's why he never came back. The failures weren't discouraging people. They were proof that something extraordinary was out there, something worth dying for. The mounting death toll became advertising. Come die with us in paradise. We've got plenty of room. Indigenous tribes started calling it the curse of the white explorer. They'd seen this pattern before. One crazy white man disappears. Then more white men come looking. They die too. Then more come, and more. It never ends. The Kalapalo people, who'd met Fawcett on his final journey, started refusing to help search parties. They knew how this story ended. They'd watched it play out for decades. Death, disease, disaster. Why help more people walk into the graveyard? The obsession peaked in the 1960s. Transistor radios brought Fawcett's story to new audiences. Books, magazine articles, television documentaries. Each one spawned fresh expeditions. Weekend warriors with modern gear, thinking they could succeed where professional explorers had failed. They bought plane tickets to Brazil like they were going to Disney World. Most never made it past the first week. The lucky ones turned back sick and broke. The unlucky ones, well, the jungle collected them too. Brazilian authorities finally started keeping records in the 1960s. The numbers were staggering. Missing person reports filed monthly, search and rescue missions launched weekly, body bags shipped back to grieving families. The government considered closing off the region entirely, making it illegal to search for Fawcett. But how do you ban a dream? How do you legislate away obsession? You can't. So they kept coming, and the jungle kept killing them. Steady as clockwork, reliable as sunrise. The saddest cases were the sons, men who'd grown up hearing their fathers tell stories about the legendary Percy Fawcett, who inherited the obsession like a genetic disease, who threw away careers, marriages, life savings, chasing a ghost, following their hero into the same green hell that had swallowed him, fathers abandoning their own children to search for someone else's lost child. The cycle never broke. The jungle was patient. It could wait. It had all the time in the world. By 1970, something shifted. The space program captured imaginations. The last frontier moved from horizontal to vertical, from jungle to stars. The flow of Fawcett searchers slowed to a trickle, but didn't stop completely. Even today, even now, people still disappear in the Mato Grosso, looking for him. The dream refuses to die. The obsession passes from generation to generation like a virus, an infection of the soul. Once Fawcett gets into your head, he never leaves. So that's the real tragedy of Percy Fawcett. Not that he died chasing his dream. Explorers die. That's the job description. The tragedy is that his death became a beacon for other deaths. His mystery became a murder weapon. His legend became a lie that killed. The man who spent his career bringing expeditions home safely became responsible for the deadliest search in exploration history. Even in death, he was still leading men into the jungle. still promising them glory, still getting them killed. Chapter 11. Bones in the Wilderness. False Hopes and Claims. 1951. 26 years since Percy vanished. Nina's now 79, still waiting by the window for news that never comes. The world's moved on. World War II's over. Television's starting up. But in some dusty corner of Brazil, the jungle's about to cough up what looks like an answer. A Brazilian expedition stumbles across human remains in Mato Grosso, and suddenly everyone's talking about Fawcett again, because these bones, they might finally be Percy's. The excitement spreads like wildfire. Newspapers across Britain and America pick up the story. Fawcett found, screams the headlines. After decades of silence, decades of theories and wild expeditions, and people dying in that green hell trying to solve the mystery, finally, something concrete, something real. Human bones in the exact region where Percy was last seen. The timing fits. The location makes sense. For the first time since 1925, it feels like the Fawcett family might actually get closure. The discovery comes from Orlando Villas-Boas, one of Brazil's most respected explorers. This isn't some treasure hunter or amateur adventurer. This is a guy who knows the jungle, knows the indigenous tribes, knows what he's looking at. He and his team are working in the Upper Xingu region when they come across a burial site. The bones are definitely European, definitely old enough to be from the 1920s, and they're right where Fawcett should have died. Villas-Boas doesn't just stumble on these bones randomly. The Kalapalo tribe tells him about them. Remember, indigenous peoples had been saying for years they knew what happened to the 3 white men, but nobody listened. Now finally, someone's paying attention. The tribal elders point to this specific spot and say, there, that's where the tall white man died. The same tall white man they described as having a full beard and speaking broken Portuguese. When the news reaches Nina in England, imagine her reaction. 26 years of not knowing, 26 years of hoping and grieving and never being sure whether to move on or keep waiting. Every knock on the door could be news. Every letter could be the answer. And now, finally, it might be over. Her husband might be coming home. Even if he's coming home as bones in a wooden box, at least she'll know. At least she can bury him properly. But Nina's smart. She's been through too many false leads to get completely carried away. Still, she authorizes the examination. The bones are carefully packaged and sent to experts, anthropologists, forensic specialists, anyone who might be able to definitively say whether these remains belong to Percy Harrison Fawcett. The scientific community's fascinated. This could solve one of the 20th century's greatest mysteries. Everyone wants to be part of the answer. Everyone wants to be the one who finally closes the book. The examination process is painstaking. Remember, this is 1951. DNA testing doesn't exist yet. They're working with what they have: skull measurements, bone structure, estimated height and age. Percy was tall, about 6 feet. He was 57 when he vanished. He'd broken his right leg years earlier in a surveying accident. The forensic team looks for evidence of that old break. They measure everything twice. They compare the skull to photographs of Percy, trying to match facial bone structure. But as the weeks go by, doubt starts creeping in. The height's close, but not exact. The age could be right, but could be wrong too. That old leg break Percy had? There's no clear evidence of it in these bones. And the skull measurements, they're in the ballpark, but human variation means that doesn't prove anything. The experts start hedging their language. Instead of confident declarations, you're getting possibly and might be and consistent with, not the definitive answer everyone wanted. Then comes the crushing blow. After months of analysis, the verdict comes back. These bones are not Percy Fawcett. They're European, yes. They're old enough, yes. They're from the right region, yes. But they're not him. The measurements don't quite match. The bone structure's wrong. Most damning of all, there's no evidence of that leg injury Percy carried his whole adult life. The experts are certain, whatever happened to Percy Fawcett, this isn't his grave. Nina receives the news with the kind of dignity she's shown for decades. Disappointment, yes, but not surprise. She's learned not to get her hopes up too high. Still, you have to imagine the emotional whiplash. For a few months there, she thought she might finally know what happened to her husband. She might finally be able to grieve properly, to move on, to stop waiting. Instead, she's right back where she started, still wondering, still hoping, still trapped in that awful limbo. The false identification affects more than just Nina. There are still searchers out there, still expeditions launching into the Amazon looking for Fawcett. For a brief moment in 1951, it looked like their quest was over. The mystery was solved. They could go home. But now they're energized again. If these bones weren't Percy's, then Percy's still out there somewhere. Dead, probably. But his body's still waiting to be found. The hunt continues. The obsession deepens. What's fascinating is how quickly the story shifts from Fawcett found back to Fawcett mystery deepens. The same newspapers that trumpeted the discovery now trumpet the disappointment, because disappointment sells papers too. The public's invested in this story. They want an ending, but they also don't want the adventure to stop. As long as Fawcett's missing, as long as the mystery remains unsolved, there's still that sense of wonder, still that possibility of discovery lurking out there in the green. The 1951 bone incident reveals something important about the whole Fawcett phenomenon. People need this mystery. They need the romance of the lost explorer, the possibility that somewhere in the Amazon there's still a secret waiting to be uncovered. When those bones turned out to be someone else's, there was disappointment, yes, but also relief. The story could continue. The legend could keep growing. Percy Fawcett was more valuable missing than found, more powerful as a question than as an answer. So by 1952, we're back to square one. Percy, Jack and Raleigh are still missing. Nina's still waiting. The Amazon's still keeping its secrets. But something's changed. The false hope of 1951 has sharpened everyone's focus. The next discovery needs to be absolutely certain. The next claim needs rock-solid proof, because getting people's hopes up just to crush them again, that's almost crueler than never finding anything at all. The search continues, but now with harder hearts and more demanding standards. Chapter 12. Echoes of Violence. Modern Revelations. 71 years after Percy Fawcett vanished, someone finally found something concrete. Not Percy himself, not his bones despite all those false claims over the decades, but evidence, real evidence of what happened in those final days. And honestly, what they discovered in 1996 was worse than anyone imagined, because the jungle hadn't just swallowed Percy Fawcett whole. It had witnessed something violent, something deliberate, something that turned his obsessive quest into a nightmare. The expedition was led by James Lynch, a documentary filmmaker who'd spent years studying Fawcett's case. Not some treasure hunter or amateur adventurer. Lynch had done his homework, mapped Percy's route using the original letters and coordinates, cross-referenced indigenous oral histories with geographical surveys. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was serious detective work, decades in the making, and Lynch had something previous searchers didn't: modern technology and a methodical approach that treated this like a crime scene. They weren't looking for Percy's body. After 7 decades, that was hopeless. They were looking for his campsite, the place where he'd sent that final message to Nina on May 29th, 1925. You need have no fear of any failure. Lynch believed if they could find that exact spot, they might find evidence of what happened next. Personal effects, equipment, maybe even Jack's camera, which could contain the last photographs ever taken of Percy Fawcett alive. The search took weeks. The Mato Grosso had changed dramatically since 1925. Cattle ranches where there used to be pristine jungle, roads cutting through Percy's wilderness. But Lynch's team had GPS coordinates based on Percy's own survey notes. They knew where he'd been heading when he disappeared. A spot near the Coleraine River, deep in Kalapalo territory. The same people who'd told searchers back in the 1950s that they'd seen Percy's party, and that something terrible had happened. They found the site on a bend in the river, high ground sheltered by trees, with access to fresh water. Classic Fawcett. He always chose his campsites carefully, but this wasn't the pristine archaeological site Lynch had hoped for. 70 years of weather, flooding, and jungle growth had scattered whatever remained. Still, they started digging methodically, grid by grid, looking for anything that might have belonged to three men who'd walked into the green hell and never walked out. The first finds were promising but not shocking. Metal fragments that could have been from camping equipment, bits of leather, possibly from boots or bags. Then they found something that made everyone stop working. Bone fragments, human bone fragments, scattered and broken in a way that didn't suggest natural death or even disease. These bones showed clear evidence of trauma, violence. Someone had died here, and they hadn't died peacefully. The question was, who? The bone analysis was brutal to read. Fractures consistent with blunt force trauma, cut marks suggesting the use of bladed weapons, signs that the remains had been deliberately scattered, not left intact for burial. This wasn't starvation or disease or snakebite. This was violence, plain and simple. Someone had attacked the campsite. Whether it was indigenous warriors, other explorers, or bandits, the bones couldn't say, but they screamed one thing loud and clear: murder. Lynch's discovery changed everything. For decades, the prevailing theories had been almost romantic. Percy going native with a tribe, living out his days as an adopted elder, or dying peacefully of malaria while still searching for his lost city. Even the hostile tribe theory assumed quick deaths, maybe arrows in a moment of cultural misunderstanding. But this evidence suggested something much darker: a prolonged attack, deliberate violence. Percy's final hours had been anything but peaceful. Think about what this means. Percy Fawcett, the man who'd survived 7 Amazon expeditions, who could navigate by stars and find water where others saw only death. He didn't just get lost and die quietly. His camp was attacked. His party was murdered. Maybe they fought back. The discovery shattered Nina's decades-long hope that her husband had somehow survived. She'd died in 1954, still believing Percy might walk out of the jungle someday, still telling reporters that he was too skilled, too experienced to simply die out there. The violence theory also explained why Percy's party had vanished so completely. If they'd died of natural causes, someone would have found bodies eventually. Equipment would have been recovered, but if they were murdered and their belongings taken or destroyed, if their bodies were deliberately concealed, that explains the total disappearance. It also explains why some of the indigenous groups gave conflicting stories to searchers. They knew what had happened, but they weren't talking. The grim irony is that Percy's obsession with finding an ancient civilization may have led him straight into the hands of very modern killers. The 1920s Amazon was lawless territory. Rubber tappers, escaped criminals, rogue military units, tribal conflicts spill over. Percy's reputation as a successful explorer, who always returned with valuable information, made him a target. Someone may have seen him as a threat, or a source of intelligence about resource locations. His fame became his death sentence. But here's what gets me about Lynch's discovery. The Amazon had kept this secret for 7 decades, preserved the evidence of Percy's violent end under layers of mud and vegetation, waiting for the right person with the right tools to uncover it. The jungle that Percy loved and respected, that he understood better than almost any outsider, it had witnessed his murder and held the proof like a time capsule, patient and silent as always. So now we know. Percy Fawcett didn't find his lost city of Zed. He didn't go native with a friendly tribe. He didn't die peacefully of fever while still pursuing his dream. He died violently, possibly trying to defend his son and young Raleigh from attackers whose motives we'll never understand. The romantic age of exploration had collided with the brutal reality of the Amazon's hidden dangers, and the jungle, as always, had kept its secrets until it was ready to reveal them. Chapter 13. From Fiction to Fact. Fawcett's Legacy. Here's something wild about Percy Fawcett. The guy who vanished in 1925, hunting for a lost city. He basically became more famous dead than alive. His story spread like wildfire through newspapers, magazines, adventure books, and then something incredible happened. Fiction writers started stealing his life. Not just bits and pieces, they took the whole blueprint. The fearless explorer, the fedora, the jungle, the ancient mysteries. Sound familiar? Yeah, we're talking about Indiana Jones. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas never officially admitted it, but come on. British explorer with military background? Check. Obsessed with ancient civilizations? Check. Survives impossible jungle dangers using wit and skill? Check. Even loses people he cares about to his obsession? That's pure Percy Fawcett. The only difference? Indy gets to come home. Percy didn't. But his legend gave birth to the greatest adventure hero in cinema history. That's quite a legacy for a man who died chasing shadows in the Amazon. And then there's Arthur Conan Doyle. You know, the Sherlock Holmes guy. He was absolutely fascinated by Percy's early expeditions. All those reports coming back from the Amazon in the 1900s. Strange animals, uncontacted tribes, rumours of ancient ruins. Doyle was eating it up. He'd hang around the Royal Geographical Society, listening to Percy's stories, taking notes, and in 1912 he published The Lost World. Professor Challenger, leading an expedition to a mysterious plateau, finding dinosaurs and primitive peoples. Ring any bells? The Lost World wasn't just inspired by Percy's adventures, it was Percy's adventures, with dinosaurs added for fun. Doyle even based Professor Challenger's personality on Percy. Brilliant but stubborn, convinced he's right when everyone thinks he's crazy, willing to risk everything for discovery. The book became a massive bestseller, spawned countless movies, TV shows, comics. Every story about explorers finding hidden worlds traces back to Percy Fawcett telling Arthur Conan Doyle about mapping the unknown Amazon. Pretty incredible, right? But here's what gets me about Percy's cultural impact. He didn't just inspire individual characters. He created an entire genre, the Lost World adventure story. Think about it. King Kong's Skull Island, Jurassic Park, The Land That Time Forgot. All those movies about explorers finding secret civilizations or surviving prehistoric dangers. They all follow the Percy Fawcett template. The rational man of science, venturing into the unknown, facing impossible odds, and sometimes not coming back. His disappearance made the story perfect, because that's the thing about Percy's legacy. It's not just what he did, it's how he vanished. The mystery made him immortal. If he'd come home in 1925, written a book, died quietly in Devon, nobody would remember him today. But walking into that jungle and never coming out, that turned him into a legend. Every adventure story needs that element of danger, the possibility that the hero might not make it. Percy gave storytellers the ultimate proof that sometimes they don't. The jungle wins. The timing was perfect too. Percy disappeared right as mass media was exploding. Radio, movies, pulp magazines. The 1920s and 30s were hungry for heroes and mysteries. And Percy's story had everything. Exotic locations, ancient secrets, a charismatic leader, and that haunting final message to his wife. You need have no fear of any failure, then silence, forever. It was better than any fiction writer could invent, because it was real, and real mystery always beats made-up mystery. Hollywood caught on fast. By the 1930s, adventure serials were everywhere. Jungle Jim, Terry and the Pirates, they all borrowed Percy's formula. Brave explorer, hostile environment, ancient treasures, indigenous peoples as either friends or enemies. The template worked because Percy had proven it could actually happen. He'd survived anacondas and arrow attacks. He'd found pottery shards from unknown civilizations. He'd mapped rivers that existed only in indigenous memory. Reality gave fiction its foundation. And the books, oh man, the books. Adventure novels exploded after Percy's disappearance. Edgar Rice Burroughs ramped up his Tarzan stories. H. Rider Haggard kept writing about lost kingdoms. New authors emerged, all trying to capture that Percy Fawcett magic, the fearless British explorer facing the unknown. Some were good, most were terrible, but they all understood the formula. Take a real person like Percy, add some supernatural elements, and you've got instant adventure. His life became the template for fictional heroism. But Percy's influence went deeper than entertainment. He changed how people thought about exploration itself. Before Percy, explorers were either scientists collecting specimens or conquistadors seeking gold. Percy was different. He was hunting for knowledge, for lost history, for proof that the world still held mysteries, that romanticism infected everything that came after. Every adventure story became a quest for forbidden knowledge. Every explorer became a seeker of truth. Percy turned exploration into storytelling. You can see his DNA in modern adventure films. The Mummy, Tomb Raider, National Treasure. They're all Percy Fawcett stories at heart. Academic or military hero becomes obsessed with ancient mystery, travels to dangerous location, faces supernatural or primitive dangers, finds incredible discoveries that challenge conventional history, sometimes wins, sometimes loses everything. The formula never gets old because Percy proved it was possible. Real explorers really did find impossible things before vanishing forever. And his influence on archaeology? Huge. Percy made the profession sexy, dangerous, romantic. Before Percy, archaeologists were dusty academics digging up pottery shards. After Percy disappeared, archaeology meant adventure. It meant risking everything for knowledge. It meant facing the unknown, armed only with courage and curiosity. Every archaeological thriller owes something to Percy Fawcett. He transformed scholarship into heroism, made learning seem like the ultimate adventure, even though it killed him. The irony is perfect. Percy spent his whole life trying to prove ancient civilizations existed in the Amazon. He died trying, never found his lost city of Zid, but his obsession created something far more lasting than any archaeological discovery. He created the modern adventure hero, the template for every explorer, archaeologist, and adventurer in popular culture. His failure became his greatest success. His death gave birth to immortal fiction. Sometimes the myth matters more than the reality. So next time you watch Indiana Jones or read about lost worlds, remember Percy Fawcett, the man who walked into the Amazon in 1925 and never came back. His bones are somewhere in that green hell, probably scattered by animals decades ago. But his spirit? His spirit is in every fedora-wearing hero who faces impossible odds for the sake of discovery. Percy found his immortality after all, just not where he was looking for it. The jungle kept his body, but the world kept his story. Chapter 14. A Forgotten Civilization, Vindication and Reflection. Turns out Percy wasn't completely insane. I know, after everything we've heard about Atlantis and mystical cities, that sounds impossible. But here's the thing about obsessed visionaries. Sometimes they're right about the big picture, even when they're spectacularly wrong about the details. Modern archaeology has been quietly proving Percy Fawcett right about something huge. The Amazon wasn't empty wilderness. It was home to massive, sophisticated civilizations. Starting in the 1980s, archaeologists began finding exactly what Percy said was there. Not Atlantis, obviously, but evidence of complex societies that supported millions of people, massive earthworks, sophisticated road networks, agricultural systems that could feed enormous populations. The kind of advanced civilization Percy insisted existed, buried under centuries of jungle growth. He was describing something real. He just wrapped it in the wrong mythology. The numbers are staggering. We're talking about pre-Columbian populations in the millions across the Amazon basin. These weren't scattered hunter-gatherer tribes. These were organized societies with permanent settlements, advanced agriculture, and trade networks spanning thousands of miles. Percy's pottery shards, real. His accounts of ancient earthworks, legitimate. His sense that something massive had been overlooked by European archaeologists, spot on. The man had genuine insights. Here's what blows my mind. Percy was documenting terra preta, these incredibly fertile black soils that could only be created by large settled populations, managing their land for centuries. He was finding geometric earthworks that we now know required coordinated labour by thousands of people. He was mapping raised field systems that supported intensive agriculture. All of this was real evidence of advanced civilization. He just couldn't let go of the Atlantis connection. Modern remote sensing technology has revealed the scope of what Percy was glimpsing. Thousands of previously unknown archaeological sites, road systems connecting distant settlements, geometric earthworks covering areas larger than many European countries, canal networks for transportation and irrigation. These weren't primitive societies struggling to survive in hostile jungle. These were sophisticated civilizations that had mastered their environment. Percy saw the edges of this world and knew it was significant. But here's the tragedy. Percy's legitimate archaeological discoveries got buried under his mystical obsessions. When he started connecting Amazon civilizations to Atlantis and theosophical theories, serious academics stopped listening. His real contributions, documenting indigenous oral histories, mapping ancient sites, recognizing evidence of large populations, all of that got dismissed along with his fantasies. The man made genuine discoveries, but wrapped them in mythology that made him look like a crank. What Percy got right was recognizing that European assumptions about the Amazon were completely wrong. The idea that tropical rainforests couldn't support complex civilizations. False. The belief that indigenous peoples were too primitive for advanced agriculture or monumental architecture. Racist nonsense. Percy understood, somehow, that the Amazon had supported sophisticated societies for thousands of years. He just couldn't explain it without invoking lost continents and ancient wisdom. The Atlantis angle was Percy's fatal flaw. Every time he connected real archaeological evidence to mystical theories about ancient advanced civilizations, he undermined his own credibility. Modern archaeology shows us that Amazon societies developed independently, creating their own solutions to environmental challenges. They didn't need wisdom from a lost continent. Their innovations were homegrown, practical, and incredibly sophisticated. Percy's romanticism blinded him to the real achievement. Here's what makes Percy's story so frustrating. Strip away the Atlantis stuff, and you've got a brilliant field archaeologist making groundbreaking discoveries about pre-Columbian America. His surveys were methodical, his documentation was detailed, his respect for indigenous knowledge was unusual for his era. He understood that oral traditions contained historical truth. He recognized that the jungle was full of archaeological sites waiting to be properly studied. Pure archaeology, he was decades ahead. Percy's emphasis on the capacity of Amazon civilizations highlighted something we're still grappling with today. The complexity of pre-Columbian societies was vastly underestimated by European scholars. Population figures were wrong by millions. Assumptions about technological capability were completely off. Understanding of indigenous environmental management was non-existent. Percy intuited this complexity and spent his life trying to prove it. He just chose the wrong framework for explaining what he found. There's something poetic about how Percy's obsession destroyed him personally while advancing human knowledge in the long run. His disappearance became a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting ambition override judgment. But his documentation of Amazon archaeology contributed to a revolution in understanding pre-Columbian America. The man who vanished chasing fantasies left behind evidence that transformed how we see indigenous history, tragedy and triumph wrapped together. Percy's story changed how we think about exploration itself. The lone white explorer mapping blank spaces on the map, that romantic image died with Percy in the jungle. Modern archaeology emphasizes collaboration with indigenous communities, scientific methodology over individual heroics, and patient research over dramatic expeditions. Percy represents the end of Victorian exploration mythology and the beginning of more responsible approaches to understanding the past. The jungle still keeps its secrets, but differently than Percy imagined. There's no lost city of Zed waiting to be discovered, but there are thousands of archaeological sites, revealing the true complexity of Amazon history. The mystery isn't about finding Atlantis, it's about understanding how sophisticated civilizations adapted to rainforest environments, managed resources sustainably, and created knowledge systems we're only beginning to appreciate. That's the real treasure Percy was seeking. In the end, Percy Fawcett got the big picture right, while missing the actual picture entirely. The Amazon was home to advanced civilizations. Indigenous peoples created sophisticated societies. Pre-Columbian America was far more complex than Europeans imagined, but the truth was more interesting than his fantasies. Real innovation beats mythical wisdom every time. Percy died chasing shadows, but he pointed us towards sunlight. Sometimes that's how discovery works. Chapter 15. The jungle keeps its secrets. 98 years later. We still don't know what happened to Percy Fawcett. Not really. We have theories, lots of them, bones that might be his. Stories from tribes, pieces of metal and leather found decades later. But the Amazon, it's not giving up its secrets. And maybe that's exactly how Percy would have wanted it. The man who spent his life chasing mysteries became one himself. The ultimate vanishing act in the world's most unforgiving theatre. The search parties started almost immediately. Nina Fawcett never stopped believing he was alive. She funded expedition after expedition, sent them into the same jungle that swallowed her husband and son, and they kept disappearing too, or coming back empty-handed, or worse. The jungle started earning a reputation, not just for taking Percy Fawcett, but for taking everyone who tried to find him. It became a graveyard of good intentions and British determination. The math is brutal when you add it up. Over the next few decades, more than 100 people died trying to find Percy Fawcett. 100. Disease got most of them. Starvation. Hostile encounters. Plain old jungle madness. Some just vanished like Percy did, leaving their own smaller mysteries. Others made it out broken, telling stories that made the legend bigger. The search for Fawcett became deadlier than anything Fawcett himself had ever attempted. The cure worse than the disease. Every few years, someone would claim to know what happened. Percy joined a tribe and went native. Percy was murdered by the Kalapalo. Percy found his city and decided to stay. Percy died of fever 3 days after his last message. Percy was captured, held prisoner for years, finally escaped, but died on the way out. The theories multiplied like jungle plants. Each one sounded reasonable until you looked closely. Then they all fell apart. The jungle wasn't talking. In 1951, a Brazilian expedition found human bones, old bones, British-sized bones. The leader, Orlando Villas-Boas, was convinced they'd found Percy Fawcett. Nina was elderly by then, desperate for closure. She wanted to believe. For a while, the world thought the mystery was solved. Percy's bones returned to civilization at last, But DNA testing decades later would prove them wrong. Not Percy, not Jack, not Raleigh, just someone else the jungle had claimed and forgotten. The expeditions kept coming. In 1996, Brazilian filmmaker Hermes Leal found evidence of violence near where Percy vanished. Broken pottery, metal fragments, signs of a struggle, maybe, or maybe just the jungle reclaiming what humans left behind. That's the thing about searching for ghosts. Everything looks like evidence when you want it badly enough. Every bent branch becomes a clue. Every story from an elder becomes gospel truth. The Amazon makes believers of us all. But here's what's wild about Percy's story. Modern archaeology has proven him partially right. Those ancient civilizations he theorized about, they existed. Satellite imagery reveals massive earthworks throughout the Amazon, geometric patterns, raised roads, evidence of cities supporting hundreds of thousands of people. The jungle wasn't empty when Europeans arrived, it was full. Percy saw the signs everyone else missed. Pottery shards and strange mounds that suggested something huge and forgotten. Scientists now estimate the Amazon supported up to 10 million people before European diseases wiped them out. Complex societies with sophisticated agriculture, trade networks spanning continents, knowledge of medicine and engineering that rivaled Europe. Percy's lost city of Zed might not have existed as he imagined it, but the civilization he sensed was real. He was looking in the right places for the right reasons. His methods were sound. His instincts were brilliant. His timing was just centuries too late. Where Percy went wrong was mixing legitimate archaeology with mystical nonsense. The Atlantis connection, the theosophical garbage, the idea that advanced beings from another continent had built these cities. He couldn't just let the Amazon be amazing on its own terms. It had to be connected to lost continents and ancient wisdom and cosmic consciousness. Reality wasn't enough. The truth wasn't magical enough. So he wrapped good science in fantasy and called it revelation. That's Percy's tragedy in a nutshell. Half visionary, half madman. He could read jungle signs like a book, navigate by stars and rivers and the flight patterns of birds, survive encounters that killed other men, but he couldn't tell the difference between archaeological evidence and wishful thinking, between scientific theory and mystical revelation. The same mind that kept him alive in the jungle eventually led him to his death in it. Vision and obsession, dancing together toward disaster. Maybe if Percy had gone alone on that final expedition, we'd remember him differently. Another Victorian explorer who died pursuing his dream. Romantic, tragic, clean, but he took Jack with him, his 21-year-old son. Bright kid, whole life ahead of him. That changes everything, makes it less noble, more heartbreaking. A father's obsession destroying more than just himself. Nina lost a husband and a son to the same jungle, to the same impossible dream. That's not romantic, that's devastating. The Amazon has this way of keeping secrets. It's not malicious, it's just thorough. Rivers change course and erase evidence. Vines swallow abandoned camps. Rain washes away footprints within hours. Bodies disappear into the ecosystem faster than you can imagine. The jungle doesn't mean to be mysterious. It just operates on different timescales than human memory. What seems permanent to us is temporary to it. What seems important to us is just another meal to it. And maybe that's fitting. Percy Fawcett spent his whole life chasing the unknowable, mapping the unmappable, finding the unfindable. He wanted to solve the jungle's mysteries, and instead became one himself. The seeker became the sought. The explorer became the explored. There's poetry in that, dark poetry, but poetry nonetheless. He wanted immortality through discovery. Instead, he got immortality through disappearance, the jungle's ultimate magic trick, making legends out of ghosts. So what do we make of Percy Fawcett? Explorer? Visionary? Madman? Victim? Father? All of the above, probably. He was brave enough to go where others feared, smart enough to survive what others couldn't, obsessed enough to keep going when others turned back, and foolish enough to confuse determination with wisdom. His story reminds us that the line between hero and tragedy is thinner than we like to think. Sometimes it's the same line, walked in opposite directions.